சில முஸ்லிம் பெண்கள் இதை அணிகிறார்கள், சிலர் அணிவதில்லை. ஆனால் நிக்காபை பற்றி கலந்துரையாடல்கள் எந்த நாளும் போல நடந்து கொண்டிருக்கின்றன, எவ்விடத்திலும் போல நடந்து கொண்டிருக்கின்றன. முஸ்லிம் சமூகம் இதை பற்றி என்ன நினைக்கிறது? I think it's important to understand what the faith, what the religion that we all believe in say about the use of niqab. So to get that opinion, I turn to Sheikh Ahmadh Yasir. What does the religion say about the use of niqab?
அதாவது ரசூல் ஸல்லல்லாஹு அலைஹி வஸல்லம் அவர்கள் சொன்னார்கள், அஸ்மா ரலியல்லாஹு அன்ஹா ஒரு ஆடையை அணிந்து கொண்டு வந்தபோது, ஒரு மெல்லிய ஆடையை அணிந்து கொண்டு வந்தபோது முகத்தையும் 2 மணிக்கட்டுக்குட்பட்ட கரங்களையும் தவிர வேறு எதுவும் வெளியே தெரியக்கூடாது என்று அழகாக சொன்னார்கள். அந்த ஹதீஸ் பலவீனமானது, லைஃபானது என்று பலர் கூறுகின்ற அதே சந்தர்ப்பத்தில் இமாம் பைஹக்கி, இமாம் அல்பானி போன்றோர் அந்த ஹதீஸ் சஹீஹானது என்று இன்னும் பல ஆதாரங்களின் அடிப்படையில் கூறுகின்றார்கள். That is one example from Sunnah. And number 2, there is hadith saying, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, those who are wearing ihram should not cover face. Ladies, we know that hadith. அந்த ஹதீஸ் சொல்ல வருகின்ற செய்தி என்னவென்றால், ஒரு பெண் இஹ்ராம் அணிந்ததன் பின்னர் முகத்தை மறைத்து வைக்க முடியாது, திறந்திருக்க வேண்டும் என்று அந்த ஹதீஸ் கூறுகின்றது. அதன் யதார்த்தம் என்னவென்றால், அன்றைய காலத்தில், அதாவது இஸ்லாம் சொல்ல முன்னரே ஜாஹிலிய கலாச்சாரங்களின் அடிப்படையில் அன்றைய அரபு மக்களிடையே உயர்ந்த குலத்து பெண்களுக்கு மத்தியில் இருந்த ஒரு 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 நடைமுறை தான் முகத்தை மூடிக்கொண்டிருப்பார்கள். அது பணக்கார வர்க்கத்து உயர்ந்த குலத்து பெண்கள் முகத்தை மூடியிருப்பார்கள். அந்த கல்ச்சர், அந்த கலாச்சாரத்தை இல்லாமல் செய்து முகத்தை திறக்க வேண்டும் என்பதற்காகத்தான் ரசூல் ஸல்லல்லாஹு அலைஹி வஸல்லம் அவர்கள் ஹஜ்ஜின் காலத்தில் பெண்கள் முகத்தை திறக்க வேண்டும் என்ற சட்டத்தை கொண்டு வந்தார்கள். மாறாக அது ஹஜ் அல்லாத காலங்களில் எல்லா பெண்களும் கட்டாய முகத்தை மூடியிருக்க வேண்டும் என்ற எந்த தேவையும் இல்லை என்பதை அந்த ஹதீஸ் எமக்கு தெளிவாக உணர்த்தி நிற்பதையும் கூட எம்மால் அவதானிக்க முடியுமாக இருக்கும். 3வது ஒரு குர்ஆன் வசனம் இருக்கின்றது. that is in சூரத்துல் அஹ்ஸாப் verse number 59. It says, யா அய்யுஹன் நபி குல்லி அஸ்வாஜிக் வ பனாத்திக் வ நிசாஇல் முஃமினீன் யுஸ்னீன அலைஹின்ன மின் ஜலாபிபிஹின் ஐயுரஃப்ன ஃபலா யுஸைன் ஐயுரஃப்ன ஃபலா யுஸைன். It says, more suitable they'll be known and should not be abused. அவர்கள் எந்த விதத்திலும், அவர்கள் அறியப்பட்டு எந்த விதத்திலும் அநியாயங்களுக்கோ தீங்கிழைக்கப்படுவதற்கோ சந்தர்ப்பம் வராமல் இருப்பதற்காக பெண்கள் அவர்களது முகத்தை திறந்திருக்கட்டும், முந்தானைகளை தாழ்த்தி கொள்ளட்டும் என்று அந்த குர்ஆன் வசனம் சொல்லி இருக்கின்றது. ஸோ அந்த ஹதீஸ், அந்த குர்ஆன் வசனம் சொல்ல வருகின்ற செய்தியும் இதுதான். பெண்கள் முகத்தை மூடியிருக்க வேண்டும் என்ற எந்த கட்டாயமும் இல்லை. that is a choice of a woman. ஸோ பெண்கள் முகத்தை திறந்திருக்கலாம், அதற்குரிய வாய்ப்புகள் இருக்கின்றன. அந்தந்த காலத்திற்கு அந்தந்த நாட்டிற்கேற்ற விதத்தில் அதனை சரிவர நடைமுறைப்படுத்துவது தான் பெண்களின் மீது கடமையாக மாறுகின்றது.
இப்போ ஷேக் யாசிர் சொல்கிற இந்த கருத்தை வச்சு பார்க்கும்போது நான் சௌத்ரி அசீமாட்ட இதை கேட்க பார்க்குறேன். இப்போ நீங்கள் இந்த முகத்தை மூடி ஆடை அணைகிற பெண்களோட இந்த நாளும் நீங்கள் பழகிறது உண்டு, அதோட உங்களோட சமூகத்தில் உங்களோட நெருக்கமானவங்க அப்படி இருக்கிறாங்க. ஸோ அப்படி எடுக்க போக்கில் இந்த ஷேக் சொன்ன மார்க்க விஷயங்களை பற்றி தெரிஞ்சிருக்கிறாங்களாண்டு ஒரு ஒப்பீனியன், உங்களோட ஒப்பீனியன் அதை அப்படி போயிட்டு
என்னோட நெருங்கினவர்கள் நாங்கள் பார்க்குற நேரம் எங்கள் ஃபேமிலியிலே நிறைய பேர், எந்த சொந்த சகோதரிகள் எத்தனையோ பேர் நிக்காப் அணிஞ்சவங்களாக தான் நிற்கிறாங்க, இருந்தாங்க. ரைட். என்னன்னா இது இஸ்லாத்தில் நிக்காப் கட்டாயம் வாஜிபாக்கப்படலைன்றதுக்கு அது ஒரு சான்றாக இருக்கும். ஏன்னா நான் நிக்காப் அணியே இல்லை, ஆனால் எந்த சகோதரி நிக்காப் அணிஞ்சிருந்தா. ஏன்னா அது இந்த புரிதல்கள், அதாவது இந்த பெர்ஸ்பெக்டிவ்ஸை விளங்கி கொள்கிற அந்த மட்டத்தில் தான் அது இருக்குது. அப்படின்னா இஸ்லாத்தில் நிக்காப் வாஜிபாக்கப்பட இல்லை, ஆனால் எந்த சிஸ்டருக்கு, அந்த எந்த சகோதரிக்கு தண்டு முகத்தை மறைக்கணுமென்ற தேவையை அவள் உணர்ந்தா அவள் கவர் பண்ணினான். அவருக்கு கவ பண்ணணுமென்று ஃபேமிலியில் எந்த ஒரு கட்டாயமும் இருக்கவும் இல்லை, கலட்டுங்கன்னு சொல்லி எந்த ஒரு கட்டாயமும் இருக்கில்லை. எங்களை பொறுத்த அளவில் நான் என் ஃப்ரெண்ட்ஸாக இருக்கட்டும், என் ஃபேமிலியாக இருக்கட்டும், நான் கண்ட நிக்காபீஸ் அவங்க வந்து ஓன் விருப்பத்தோடு, அவங்களோட சொந்த விருப்பத்தோடு அதை அணிஞ்சவங்களாகவும், முக்கியமாக ஜஸ்ட் ஒரு ஆடையாக இல்லை, அது ஒரு மார்க்கத்திட ஒரு விஷயமாக அவங்க உண்மையாக அதை ஏற்றுக்கொண்டன்றதும் இங்கே கட்டாயம் இந்த கருத்தை நான் சொல்லணும், கட்டாயம் அதை தெரியப்படுத்தணும். ஒரு ஆடையாக மட்டும் இல்லாமல் அதை அல்லாஹுக்காக செய்கிறேன் என்ற ஒரு 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 வீவ்லையும் அவ தான் அணிஞ்சிருந்தாங்க. ஆனால் இந்த வீவ் டோட்டலி கிளியர். இது வந்து வாஜிப் இல்லை, அணியலாம் அணியாமலும் இருக்கலாம். அதனால் எனக்கு ஒரு நாளும் யாரும் ஃபேஸ் கவர் பண்ணுங்க நிக்காப் அணிங்கன்ற எந்த சந்தர்ப்பத்திலையும் யாரும் ஃபோர்ஸ் பண்ணினதில்லை. நாங்களும் வாஜிபில்லை தானே நீங்கள் கலட்டுங்கண்டு இந்த சந்தர்ப்பத்துக்கு முதல்ல நாங்கள் யாரையும் அப்படி ஃபோர்ஸ் பண்ணவும் இல்லை.
Right. Building up on Azema's opinion, I just also want to extend that to Qaanita. In your circles that you move with, and the people whom you have spoken to, who are niqabis, who wear the niqab, do they hold the same opinion as Azema shared? And also, quite importantly, are they also aware of the facts stated by Sheikh Yasir about the requirement of wearing the niqab, and are they convinced that it is mandatory in the religion, or what is their general opinion about it?
So again, I think you get diverse views like she mentioned. So there are some who have no clue why they're covering. So only after this issue, I was talking to a friend of mine who is, because of the ban, obviously not covering now, and she's also posting her videos up. So when I spoke to her, she said she didn't realize why she had to cover. So now she's questioning, is it a must or not? So you have that opinion, plus you have the opinion of others who have studied it and done their own research into it. So personally myself, I used to cover, and when the ban is lifted, I will continue to cover. If I am to go abroad, I am going to cover, because I understand according to the law of the country, we have to abide by it. If we are citizens, we have to abide by it. So personally, my personal opinion, again, not judging everyone, none of that, it's just a personal opinion. It took me over a year, myself and my sister, to convince my mom to give us permission to cover, right? The only reason we did that is because before taking on that decision, did a thorough research into this. And so I guess what he mentioned, I'm going to give my perspective, so the Quran says you ponder and reflect. So the Quran talks to each of us in different ways. It's a manual, it's a miracle, and it will talk to each of us in our different ways, in our different situations. So for me personally, the fact about the ayah, if you take the ayah per se, my understanding of it is different, right? So when it says draw the cloaks over yourself, so when I say myself, I would take it from head to toe. That's myself. I won't take it from my shoulders onwards. So when you say over, my understanding is it includes your face. Again, it's only my understanding. Each one's understanding is different. Situations are different. Some situations, maybe you can't do it, and that's understandable. So that's one. And so in order to recognize, because only when you cover completely, they recognize as a believing woman, there is more to the ayah. So that's one. And the fact about, I think when I was speaking to Aamina, I was telling her about in ihram, not to cover your face. So logically speaking, I used to think when you go to the doctors, they say switch off your phones. Okay, so it's generally switched on. Only for that moment you switch it off. So if you look at the hadith, it says particularly in ihram. So my understanding again was very different to, maybe there is more context to it, Allahu Alam, but for what I have studied, I was telling Aamina, I prefer to play it safe, right? So I'm only here maybe approximately 63 years. Anything more is a bonus. So I told her, if I am to die, the day I am questioned, Allah will never ask me, why did you cover more? He'll never do that. But He will ask me, why did you cover less? And I personally, I don't want to take that chance. I don't want to take that risk because my eternity is at stake. So I rather for that 63 years, it's okay. I'm going to manage it. I will balance it. Of course, when you go through security, people ask you, you have to be, you have to coordinate with them, you have to be nice to them, you can't make it difficult on people. Like you can do all of that, but again, I think people did it wrong, and that's the reason we are in the situation we are today. If they had done it right, I don't think we would be facing such a dilemma right now.
There is so much of diversity even within our community that we speak about. So I move on to Faiqa. Faiqa මොකද හිතන්නේ දැන් Faiqa ඔයා ඉන්නවා බහුතර සමාජයක් එක්ක දැන් ආයිෂා සිද්දිකායකින් එළියට ආවට පස්සේ ඔයා කැලණි විශ්වවිද්‍යාලයේ දැන් ඔයාගේ අධ්‍යයන කටයුතු කරනවා. එතකොට ඔයාට ඔයාගේ සමකාලීන මිතුරියෝ ඉන්නවා. එතකොට ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ අතර තියෙන අපි මේ අහන්නේ මේ ඔයා ගැන දකින්නේ කොහොමද කියලා. නිකාබ් එක අඳින මිනිස්සු ගැන නැත්නම් නිකාබ් එක අඳින අය ගැන සහ ඒ ගැන තියෙන පොදු මතය ගැන ඔයාගේ ඉන්න සමාජ ස්තරයන් එක්ක ඒගොල්ලන් හිතන දේ මොකක්ද කියන එක ඔයා කොහොමද ඒ දේ දකින්නේ?
මම ඉගෙනගත්තු ආයතනයක් හරි කිසිම දෙයක් මම නියෝජනය කරන්නේ නැහැ මෙතනදී. මේක මගේ පෞද්ගලික මතයක්. ඒකෙදි මම හිතන්නේ එක මතයක මම හිටියා. ඒ කියන්නේ අපි කොච්චර කවර් කරනවද ඒක හොඳයි කියන එක. ඒත් මේ ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ තියෙන સંદર્ભයට අනුව මම හිතනවා අපි ඒක දැන් අපිට අනිවාර්ය කරලා නැති දෙයක් හින්දා ඒක ඒ අදහස අපි චුට්ටක් වෙනස් කරගත්තොත් හොඳයි කියලා. ඒ කියන්නේ මේ බෑන් එකට කලින් මම හිටිය මතය ඇවිල්ලා අපි නිකාබ් එක ගැන මට තිබ්බේ ඒක අපි නැතුව නිකාබ් එකක් නැතුව ජෙනරල් අපේ හිජාබ් එක තිබ්බොත් අපේ ශ්‍රී ලංකා සමාජයත් එක්ක අපි බහුජන ජීවිතයක් අනිත් ජාතිත් එක්ක එකතු වෙලා වැඩ කරන හින්දා ඒක ඒගොල්ලන්ටත් අපිත් අතර එක බැරියර් එකක් වගේ තියෙනවා. So මම ඉද්දිත් මට මගේ යාළුවෝ හිටියා කැලණි යුනිවර්සිටි එකේ මගේ යාළුවෝ හිටියා කවර් කරන එක. එතකොට එයාලට තිබ්බ ප්‍රතිචාරයක මට හිතුණා මට අනිත් කට්ටියත් එක්ක එකතු වෙලා යන්න තියෙන අවස්ථාව වැඩි වුණා මං නිකාබ් එක නැති ඉන්න හින්දා. ඒ කියන්නේ අර නිකාබ් එක තියෙන හින්දා එයාලට දැන් කතා කරනවද නැද්ද? ඔය වගේ අදහස් තිබ්බා කතා කරන්න පුළුවන්ද ඔය වගේ මත. ඒ හින්දා හැබැයි තව එක පැත්තක් තියෙනවා අපි කාටවත් අපි අඳින කාන්තාවකට තමන් අඳින දේ මොකද්ද කියලා එක නීතියක් විසින් මේ බලපෑමකට ලක් කරලා ඒක මේක අඳින්න එපා කියන එක ගැන මම එකඟ නැහැ. ඒක එයා තුලින්ම එයා විසින්ම ඒක එන්න ඕන දෙයක්. even නිකාබ් එක වුණත් ඒක එයාගේ choice එකක් හැටියට ගන්න එයා විසින්මද නැත්නම් මොන හරි දෙයක් එයාව බලපෑමකට ලක් කරනවද මොන හරි හේතුවක් එක්ක මේ පෞල් පසුබිමේ මොන හරි දෙයක් එයාගේ මත එයා ඩිපෙන්ඩ් වෙන්නේ නැතුව එයා තුලින් මේ ඩිසිෂන් එක එනවා නම් ඒක වටිනවා කියලා මම හිතනවා.
ඔය ඇත්තටම දැන් අපි ඒ තත්ත්වය ගැන ඒ තත්ත්වය ගැන අපි බලද්දී අපිට සමහර වෙලාවට අපි දකින දේ තමයි දැන් අපි බහුතර මතයක් තියෙනවා පෞල් වලින් සමහර වෙලාවට මේකට අපි කියන්නේ එන්කරේජ් කරනවා එහෙමත් නැත්නම් උත්සුක කරනවා කියලා. ඉතින් අපි ඊට වඩා සමහර වෙලාවට අපි දකින දෙයක් තමයි lack of awareness කියන එක. දැන් අර කනිට සඳහන් කරා වගේ මේක ගැන ඇයි මේක කරන්නේ? එතකොට දැන් ෂේඛ් යාසිරුත් සඳහන් කරා ඇයි මේ දේ කරන්නේ කියන එක ගැන ගැඹුරු අවබෝධයක් මේ කරන පිරිස් අතර පවා තියෙනවාද කියන ප්‍රශ්නය ඇත්තටම මේ සාකච්ඡා තුළදී මතුවෙනවා. So Aamina, I want to take it to you now. When you come to meet the majority community, you might have your own personal opinion about your faith, your belief, and that's the utmost to you, and that you have it with the highest regard. But when you're confronted with the majority community, and let's for a moment let's forget the Easter Sunday attack in terms of the niqab, and also let's reverse back in time, because the Muslim community, as we also know, have been having this discussion for quite a long time about the niqab and the usage of the niqab in the country where Muslims are a minority. So how do you think at present, after the imposition of the niqab ban, how do the Muslim women who have been wearing the niqab are dealing with it, and how are they dealing with the majority community? What do you think?
Immediately, obviously, there was a lot of shock. It was something. It was an overnight change, and there was trauma as well. And over period, there was also reflection. right? And I think the last 4 months in particular has given everyone in this country an opportunity to reflect. Certain liberties have been taken away overall, particularly for the Muslim community. There are racist comments, and it's now being able to understand, okay, where did this come from also? I mean, there are different reasons, we can explore those in depth later, but how has this impacted Muslim women? I see different perspectives, and I see, for instance, let me focus on the reflection, right? Now it's the time to think, all right, was I doing something in a certain way that could have been better? Personally, as in my Islamic ideas, is that Islam teaches mindfulness first. You have to be aware of your neighbor at all times. You have to be aware of your environment at all times. And I know people use the rights argument, but we are more about responsibilities versus rights. And so I feel at this point, people are learning to become more mindful. People are understanding their context. It's not about, and another thing Islam teaches is overcoming your nafs, which is your ego. And this is again my personal observation. I saw a lot of ego and self-defensiveness that came in niqab conversations even before the attacks. Like if it was brought up, it was like, oh, but it is my right, or so what, you know. But and that's with everything in life. And generally, I feel with anything, it's a chance to reflect, to think, okay, to explain your position in a way that, like, you know, how Qaanita has explained it, that is understood. If you cannot explain your position, then it's possibly that you yourself are unaware, so to research better. And personally, I feel that the Muslim women and men and the community needs to be open to more, or at least expose themselves to diverse ideas. And I believe in the Quranic the guidance that the truth stands out from the false. And I mean, that's again, yeah, and that's again, it's different to be different people, and I mean, it's very specific in the Quran, but I'm just using that ayah to say how it's, you only know it if you know it more, if you seek knowledge. And so I think now people are actually, like Qaanita said, are reflecting, they're seeking that knowledge, and the idea of choice might be clearer, because I know, for instance, and this was a question I was hoping Qaanita would answer, about how madrasas tend to mandate the niqab as part of the uniform, which is why you saw such a rise in numbers of women wearing niqab in Sri Lanka. So, and the reaction to that is what we see, what happened before the attacks and what we saw blow up after the attacks. So now is a chance to give people, as in to seek knowledge, actually exercise true choice, and to exercise self-respect, mutual respect. So I think that's what's happened in the community as well, and that's the process everyone is going through right now.
I think I was talking to Aamina again last night. I was telling her 2 nights before that it's so important that the schools we go to, plus our home environments, teach us to not blind follow. So every time we come home and we tell my dad, you know, we learned this. So the Islam teacher, the Quran teacher, she taught us this. He would be like, did you take the book and read it for yourself? Did you open the Quran? Did you see? Did you open the Hadith book? Did you see? Who is the author of the book? Who narrated the Hadith? So he would ask us these questions. So before we actually went to him, we would do our own research, and then we would go to him and then speak to him about it. So it's very important that our schooling environment plus parenting teaches the youth, teaches children to actually know why you're doing certain things. You don't just do 5 prayers, because when you hit a certain age, you don't want to do it anymore, because you never understood how it spiritually connects to you, right? So one common example I would give is the word hijab, for example. All of us understand hijab to be what we wrap around our heads. So when we did the tafsir, and she went into the word analysis of hijab, in the Quran it's used 7 times, and it means to veil, to curtain, a partition. And I was like, subhanallah, even the hijab already gives you, it's so in-depth, the meaning, it already tells you what you're supposed to do. It's just that we haven't understood it. So again, parenting, schooling system, either we have to change the system, we have to train the youth to be able to question and know why they're doing it, so that in the long run it helps, as opposed to blind following. After some time, you're just going to lose your kids anyway.
Okay. මම පොඩ්ඩක් ෆයිකාගේ පැත්තට හැරෙවුවොත් දැන් මම අහන්නේ සහ මම කියන්නේ ඇත්තටම අපි මේක මුස්ලිම් සමාජයේ විතරක් පොදු දෙයක් නෙමෙයි බහුතර සමාජයේ හැම තැනකම තියෙනවා කාන්තාව මෙහෙමයි පිරිමියා මෙහෙමයි කියලා පොඩි කාලේ ඉඳන්ම අපි කියනවා ඒ ජෙන්ඩර් රෝල්ස් බලෙන් අපිට ඉම්පෝස් කරලා තියෙනවා. එහෙමත් නැත්නම් ඒ ජෙන්ඩර් රෝල්ස් මෙන්න ගෑනු කෙනා මේ විදියයි පිරිමි කෙනා මේ විදියයි මේ විදියට තමයි ඔයාලා හැදෙන්න ඕනේ කියන එක පොඩි කාලේ ඉඳන්ම කියනවා. ගෑනු ළමයට කියනවා කකුල හරහට තියලා වාඩි වෙන්න ඕනේ කියලා පිරිමි ළමයට කියනවා ඕන විදියකට ඉන්න පුළුවන් කකුල් දෙක උඩ දාගෙන ඉන්න පුළුවන්. පිරිමි ළමයා ගෑනු ළමයා රෝස පාට ගන්න ඕනේ පිරිමි ළමයා නිල් පාට ගන්න ඕනේ. ඉතින් මේක වාණිජකරණයත් එක්ක මේක ඉතා දැඩි ව්‍යාකූල තත්වයකට පත් වෙලා තියෙනවා. දැන් මෙහෙම තියෙන වටපිටාවක මෙහෙම හැදිලා එන ගෑනු ළමයින්ට ඇත්තටම තියෙනවද තීරණයක් ගන්න ස්වෛරී අයිතියක් තියනවද? Tamanට තියෙන අයිතියක් තියනවද? එහෙමත් නැත්නම් Tamanට choice එකක් තියනවද? නිකාබ් එක අඳින්න ඕනේද නැද්ද කියන එක. එහෙමත් නැත්නම් ඒගොල්ලන් ඊ තැනට ඇවිල්ලා මෙතනින් එහාට මට කරන්න දෙයක් නැහැ. එක්ක හිජාබ් එක, එක්ක නිකාබ් එක දෙකෙන් මට මොකක්ද ඕනේ? මම මේ උගන්වලා තියෙන විදිහට අනුව මෙතනට යනවා. මම අහන්නේ ඒ වගේ තැනකටද කාන්තාව තල්ලු වෙලා ගිහිල්ලා තියෙන්නේ? එහෙම නැත්නම් කාන්තාවට මේ ගැන ඔයාගේ අදහස මොකක්ද මේක?
මම දකින විදිහ මම ඉස්සලා හිතනවා සමහර පිරිසක් ඉන්නවා. ඒක දෙකක් තියෙනවා. දැන් කතා කරපු විදිහට දැන් සමහර කට්ටිය තමා තුලින්ම තමා විසින්ම මේ ලයික් හිජාබ් එකක් පිළිපදින්න නැතුව ඉඳලා පස්සේ ඒගොල්ලන් දැනුවත් වෙලා ඒ මතින් ඒගොල්ලන් හිජාබ් එකට යන පිරිසකුත් ඉන්නවා. එහෙම නැතුව තව පිරිසකුත් ඉන්නවා තාත්තා කිව්වා නැත්නම් ෆැමිලි එකේ හැමෝම අඳිනවා. එහෙම මගේ යාළුවෝ මම දන්න කට්ටිය ඉන්නවා. එයාට කැමති නෑ එයාට නිකබ් එකක් අඳින්න. හැබැයි එයාගේ අම්මා තාත්තා හැමෝම ෆෝස් කරන හින්දා එයාට ඒක අඳින්න සිද්ධ වුණ අවස්ථාවක් තියෙනවා. මේ දෙකම පරිසරයත් එක්ක තියෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ කාන්තාවක් කියන්නේ මේ විදියට ඉන්න ඕනේ. එයාට සමහර දේවල් දැන් රෑ හවස් වෙලා ඉන්න එපා. ඔය වගේ දෙයක් එක්ක හිජාබ් එකත් ඔය අනිවාර්යෙන් එයා කැමති හෝ නැති එයා ඇවිල්ලා වැඩි වියටපත් වුණාම ඒකත් එක්ක එයා හිජාබ් එක අඳින්න ඕනේ කියන තැනට තල්ලු වෙනවා. ඒ දෙකම මම දකිනවා.
Right. Does anybody want to add anything to it? Or?
Basically, as Muslims, how many of us actually know what's in the Quran? So when we actually question, we don't know how to respond because we don't know. We've all been in that situation. So like the Quran says, there is no compulsion in the deen. So obviously, if the girls or the boys they know this, they understand that it's through their understanding and their own submission that they can do whatever they have to do for the deen. They have to love it, basically, not be forced into it. So that's important that we understand what we are reciting daily.
Sheikh,
So and there are many niqab. Those who are wearing niqab. They are getting one idea of one school of thoughts idea. So but as we are living minority in Sri Lanka, so we have to study the fiqh of minorities. Hope you know that fiqhul aqalliyat. So fiqh of minority. So if we study that and get the different perspectives, different ideas of other thoughts, other mazhabs and other schools of thoughts, then it would be easy for a girl to understand whether it is worth for me to wear or not. Recently I got a sad story. So if a niqabi girl thinks that wearing niqab is wajib, she would be seeing others doing sin. So it is very worst. So she might be forcing others with very worst words or orders. So she might be saying you are doing a haram, you are doing a sin, it's haram, so you must wear. So she would be forcing others to wear. So it's not good. So all should have to come for a platform that we can study different faiths, different ideologies, different thoughts. So that would be helping all of us to understand and all of us to respect others, inshallah.
Azema, இப்போ ஷேக் சொன்ன போல இந்த சிறுபான்மை சமூகத்தை பற்றி இல்லாட்டி அந்த சமூகமாக நாங்கள் ஒரு நாட்டில் வாழப்போக்கில் அதுக்கான ஒரு குறிப்பிட்ட ஃபிக்கு இருக்குதுன்னு எனக்கு சொல்லப்பட்டுச்சு. இப்போ ஒரு டீச்சராக ஆசிரியராகவும் நீங்கள் வேலை செய்கிறனால இந்த இந்த ஃபீல்டில் நீங்கள் இருந்ததுனால உங்களோட ஒப்பீனியன் எப்படி?
எட்டக்கு முதல்ல ஒரு சிறுபான்மையினராக வாழ்ந்தன்ற ஒரு ஃபீலிங் எங்களுக்கு இருக்கே இல்லை. ஏன்னா நாங்கள் இந்த ஒரு நாட்டில் ஒரு சர்வசமனான ஆக்களாக நாங்கள் வாழ்ந்திருந்தோம். அந்த ஒரு ஃபீலிங் எந்த ஒரு சந்தர்ப்பத்திலையும் இருக்கே இல்லை. எஜுகேஷனாக ஜொப்பாக நாங்கள் எங்களோட ட்ரெஸ் கோட்லையா எதுலேயுமே நாங்கள் அந்த எல்லா விதமான சலுகை எல்லா விதமான இது அருள்களையும் அனுபவித்து கொண்டிருந்தாக்களாகத்தான் நாங்கள் இருந்தோம். இப்படி ஒரு சந்தர்ப்பம் வரும் பொழுது தான் எங்களுக்கே தெரியும், சிறுபான்மையினராக ஒரு நாட்டுக்கு ஒரு நாட்டில் நாங்கள் இருக்கிற ஒரு பிரஜையாக நாங்கள் இருக்கிறோம்னா எங்களையால் நாட்டுக்கு நடக்க வேண்டிய விடயங்கள் என்ன, இப்போ இவ்வளோ காலம் நாட்டிலிருந்து நாங்கள் பெற்றுக்கொண்டோம், நாட்டுக்கு நாங்கள் என்ன செஞ்சோம் என்றது. அப்போ நாட்டுக்கு நாங்கள் செய்ய வேண்டிய விடயங்கள்னு வரக்குள்ள கட்டாயமாக நாங்கள் விட்டு ஒரு பிழையாக கூட இருக்கலாம். அந்த சிறுபான்மையினராக நாங்கள் எந்த அளவு தூரத்துக்கு அந்த எங்களுடைய நடைமுறைகள் இருக்கணுமென்றதை கற்றுக் கொடுக்கலன்றது அந்த விடயம் அதிகமாக பேசிப்பட இல்லை இந்த அட்டாக்குக்கு காலங்களில். ஏன்னா நாங்கள் அப்படி ஒரு டாப்பிக்கை பேச வேண்டிய தேவையில் இருக்கவும் இல்லை. இப்போ தான் அந்த ஃபீலிங் இருக்குது. கட்டாயமாக இந்த விடயங்கள் போதிக்கப்பட்டிருக்கணும், எல்லாருக்கும் தெரிஞ்சிருக்கணும். ஒரு பிரஜையாக ஒரு நாட்டில் இருக்கிற நேரம் ஒவ்வொருத்தருடையும் ஸ்டாண்ட் எந்த அளவில் இருக்கணும், ஒவ்வொருத்தருடைய ஸ்டாண்டும் எப்படி இருக்கணும், அந்த ஸ்டாண்ட் சரியாக கிளியராக இருக்குமா இருந்தால் இப்படி சடனான ஒரு லோவோ ஒரு விஷயமோ எங்கள்கிட்ட வரைக்க நாங்கள் டக்குன்னு அதை கம்பேர் பண்ணி ஓவர் கம் ஆகிற ஒரு பொசிஷனுக்கு நாங்கள் வந்துடுவோம். நாங்கள் இருக்கிறது இங்கே தான்ன்றது அந்த 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 மைண்ட் செட்டப் எங்களுக்கு வருமாக இருந்தால் இப்படி ஒரு இஷ்யூவுக்கு இது நல்லம்மா இல்லையா எடுக்கிறதா இல்லையாண்டெல்லாம் நாங்கள் யோசிச்சு கொண்டு இருக்க தேவையில்லை. இந்த நாட்டோட ஃப்யூச்சர் நெக்ஸ்ட் ஸ்டெப் நான் எங்கே போவேன்ற ஒரு ப்ராடர் வியூ இருக்குமாக இருந்தால் நாங்கள் ஓவர் கம் ஆகி போயிட்டு கொண்டே தான் இருப்போம்.
Moving on to Maryam, taking that question, did the Muslim community, she mentioned an interesting point. Azema mentioned that we did not feel that we were a minority when we lived in Sri Lanka prior to the Easter Sunday attack. So my question is, did the Muslim community take those opportunities given by the majority community or the country for granted?
I don't know. I wouldn't speak for the whole Muslim community about whether we took things for granted or not, because this is a country that has had a history of complicated relationships with minorities. But two things that I would like to comment on are what Sheikh Ahmadh Yasir said about the fiqh of living as a minority. That is not something I knew until he actually taught us this at a different session. I didn't realize that Muslims had a different fiqh for, if they lived as a minority. But I do know also that just for practical reasons, growing up, I would be reminded of the fact that I was a minority, not necessarily in a negative sense. And I think that's partly what Azema meant when she said, we didn't feel like minorities living here because we weren't, sorry?
We were not on the receiving end.
Not always, exactly. But there were times when I would be reminded. For instance, I remember when I first started wearing the hijab and I was very passionate about it. And it was still the war, I think. And I think I had to take my hijab off for security reasons, and I got very passionately angry about it. And my father said, "Look, calm down. It's just a matter of national security, and it's just for a moment." And then he told me, "Look, we live here as a minority, and we need to keep that in mind. We need to learn to make allowances every now and then because other people are making allowances for us too." And that made a lot of sense to me when I looked at the way I live my daily life as well. But coming back to a few other points raised here as well, I'm sorry if I'm taking it to a slightly different tack, but we talked a lot about personal decisions, about self-reflection, and I'm wondering at some level if that's also a matter of privilege. Like Qaanita said, there's a certain onus on your family and on your school or the society that's basically raising a young child to encourage them to think. But I don't think that's a privilege that's been afforded to everyone. And I also don't think it's easy to say, okay, we need to change the system first, so we're going to start telling children to start thinking on their own. It's not going to happen overnight. So at times like that, I think it's also important that we hold institutions accountable. Institutions, for instance, that they could be religious institutions, they could be educational institutions, because they have a wider reach And I don't want to use the word brainwashing because that just sounds too simplistic. But sometimes when you see people doing things in large numbers, you question where it's coming from. And there's sometimes the understanding that it's coming from some kind of particular widespread ideology, which may not necessarily be wrong, but I think it can be questioned. And those are things that I ask myself. For instance, when I heard about this minority fiqh and I realized I didn't know about it, I asked myself, how come I didn't know about it? You know, was there a gap in what was being taught to me throughout my life? So I think those are questions worth pondering on.
And there were two schools. So if you went to certain Islamic gatherings, and these were all by women teachers, while others would say, okay, you have to wear abaya, right? And the other school, and then they would be anti-niqab, but they would be, you have to wear abaya. And then there would be another that said you had to progress onto the niqab. And those little gatherings of Islamic ideologies didn't exist in my mother's generation. She has probably never attended any of those. They had, you know, so that was an ideological change which I witnessed going to an Islamic school. Because when we went to school, we just wore shalwar kameez and scarf. We only had one girl in niqab in my entire batch. And that's changed if you go back now. Mainly because there were also other institutes that were formed that pushed this idea, and then people felt like, okay, that was the only way. And then in terms of, so you won't observe this so much in Malaysia, maybe other Muslim majority countries, because they have their own institutes of Islam which are actually connected to the state, yes. Right? Whereas ours are not connected to the state, so you have which is also, it's nice to have pluralistic thoughts and ideas. So with Malaysia, you don't see as much diversity of thought because it's a Muslim majority country. Your emir, your ruler will have a say and you follow, and that's why it's a lot broader. But with Sri Lanka, I mean, I think it's after the attacks that you suddenly realize how very different kinds of Muslims are there. I mean, we understood it, but for the other community to realize this as well. And it also got us united, you know, because we came together to have, even this is happening, this conversation is happening. And then you realize how also we've kind of veered off from each other in many ways, and this is an attempt for us to get closer to each other. And now it's also a time to analyze, where did we go off? And there was a lot of judgment. Post the attacks, you used the attacks as an opportunity to, and you saw the divisions within the community. You saw the divisions between those who followed tariqas versus those who followed certain other jamaats, and everyone, you know, accusing each other of extremism. So again, I know this is a little off, but coming back to the dress code, and do we respect pluralism? Do we look at this Sri Lankan Muslim dress that there was, during the attack, there was this movement to kind of get everyone to dress a certain way like our grandmothers or grandfathers, without understanding the history of the changes of dress and fashion. And you have to have an academic on board to explain that to you, and that men had to change their dress because of colonization far before, in fact, and that is also a kind of oppression, discrimination and lack of choice, that they have also had to face institutionalized dress codes much before women.
So that also brings me to the role of a man in this discussion. How much do we educate men about respecting the woman, irrespective of whether they wear the hijab, whether the niqab, or whether they walk without anything? How much do we encourage men for this?
Yeah. So that is a good question, and that would be the solution for most of the problems the women are facing these days. Yes, so we have to aware especially the younger generation youth, younger generation. Yes, even Quran says, உங்களுடைய பார்வைகளை தாழ்த்திக் கொள்ளுங்கள், right? First it says directly to the men, and then it says to women. பெண்களாக இருந்தாலும் they have to lower their gaze, right? அது அப்படி வந்ததுக்கு காரணம் என்னென்னா, அந்த பார்வை தான் starting up with some issues, problems, right? Even once Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam advised another Sahabi, I forgot to whom it was, saying, முதலாவது பார்வை உனக்குரியது, ரெண்டாவது பார்வை ஷைத்தானுக்குரியது. It says, காண்றது வேற, பார்க்கறது வேற, right? So சம்டைம்ஸ் கண்ட உடனே ரைட் ஒரு பாவத்தை ஒரு பிழை உண்டு ஒரு தவறு ஒன்று செய்கிறேன்ற ஃபீலிங்கோடு உடனே திரும்பிட்டு போகலாம். ஆனால் திரும்பவும் பார்த்து அதை ஃபாலோ பண்ணி டிஸ்டர்ப் பண்ணி அந்த ஹராஸ்மெண்ட்ஸுக்கு எல்லாம் போகிற ஒரு லெவலுக்கு கம்யூனிட்டியில் இருக்கிற யூத் ஸ்பெஷலி மென் போகிற நேரம் it will end up with some issues, crisis. So that will create those ladies to be away from these people. So அந்த லெவலுக்கு எங்கள்ட யூத்தை வழிகாட்ட வேண்டிய தேவை கம்யூனிட்டியில் இருக்குது, எஸ்பெஷலி பாய்ஸ், ரைட்? ஸோ அது முஸ்லீம் கம்யூனிட்டியாக இருக்கலாம், அதர் ஃபெய்த்ஸ், இந்த கம்யூனிட்டியாக இருந்தாலும் ஸ்ரீலங்கன் யூத்தை கைட் பண்ண வேண்டிய தேவை இருக்குது. உமன் பெண்களை பார்க்குற பார்வையில் உங்களோட பெர்ஸ்பெக்டிவ்ஸை கொஞ்சம் ப்ரோடராக வச்சுக்கோங்க. மோசமாக பிழையாக பார்க்குற அந்த கல்ச்சர்லேருந்து வெளியே வாங்க. அதை நாங்கள் பல வெஸ்டர்ன் கண்ட்ரீஸில் we can see it, right? So they are mingling, they are engaging in lots of platforms. But in Sri Lanka it's very difficult since they are narrow-minded. Our youth are narrow-minded. ஸோ அதுக்குரிய பிளாட்ஃபார்ம்ஸை நாங்கள் உருவாக்கணும், அவங்களுக்குரிய ஆப்பர்ச்சுனிட்டிஸை க்ரியேட் பண்ணணும், அவங்களுக்கு இது சம்மந்தமான தேவையான ஸ்பிரிச்சுவல் கைடன்ஸை வழங்கணும், அவங்களுக்கு தேவையான லாஜிக்கல் பெர்ஸ்பெக்டிவ்ஸில் ஷரியா பெர்ஸ்பெக்டிவ் நம்ம அவங்கள கைட் பண்ணணும். அப்படி ஒரு சிச்சுவேஷனுக்கு நாங்கள் எங்களோட நாட்டில் இருக்கிற யூத்தை கொண்டு வர இயலுமாக இருந்தால் நிச்சயமாக அது இந்த உமன் ஃபேஸ் பண்ணுற பல விஷயங்களில் ஹராஸ்மெண்ட்ஸ்லேருந்து சேலஞ்சஸ்லேருந்து வெளியே வாரதுக்குரிய ஒரு நல்ல ஆப்பர்ச்சுனிட்டியாக இருக்கும், நல்லதொரு சொல்யூஷனாக கூட இருக்கும் இன்ஷா அல்லாஹ். That is from my side.
Okay. Anybody wants to add to it?
So just going back on that reply, I was just thinking it brings it all down to what Aamina was saying. You need to know what your responsibility is as opposed to what your rights is. So here again, if you know that that's your responsibility, you would give. So if you take Niqab bayans, majority of the time it's told that the Niqab bayan, the women are not present sadly, even though
it's about the woman.
You know? Yeah, and the topic discussed is what the women should do for the man. But the woman is not there. How would this message go across? Rather, the discussion should be what's your responsibility as a husband, what's your responsibility as a spouse. Then we are creating an atmosphere where the marriage is more stable, there is more barakah in it. So again, I think it boils down to you need to know your responsibility as opposed to just thinking what's my right.
So I turn to Maryam. Being an independent researcher and also analyzing the situation after the Easter attack, though it seemed as an immediate response to the Easter attack, what to make of it? Was the Niqab ban really necessary in your opinion, or would you rather suggest, or with the observations that you have in the community, would you rather suggest another broader or more accommodating way of resolving this discussion or going about this discussion within the Muslim community and ask them to come up with some of their own sort of ideas? What do you think about it?
It's interesting that you ended that with ask the Muslim community to come up with their own suggestions. That's going to be very tricky. We know that from experience working on MMDA reforms. When I started out, I told you I didn't have an opinion on things, on this particularly. Even today, it's very hard to take, for somebody like me who does not wear the niqab, but who still has a very, who likes to think she has a very firm understanding of what Islamic teachings are and what human rights are all about. It's still tricky, and I sometimes wonder if I might have a very strong opinion today and maybe change that tomorrow depending on what I learn. And that's when I start thinking about what Aamina was talking about when she said there's a lot of self-reflection going on over here, and a lot of this is part of a process. I feel that well seated here myself because like I said, I don't wear the niqab, but I am surrounded by sometimes opinions. Like for instance, I've heard people in my own friend circles or in my own family say that, you know, the niqab's not necessary. We don't need to do that. Or they also talk about issues of responsibility, like what Aamina brought out. You know, we live as a minority in this country. We need to take that into account. And most days I'm veering more towards that kind of opinion. But at the same time, what Qaanita brought up today is something I'd never thought about before. Her reasons for why she wears the niqab, her interpretation of the religion. But one thing that I can go back to safely is something that Faiqa brought up, which is something that we've all had to deal with as women, the idea of being told what you can and cannot wear. And that's how you realize that something like the conversation around the niqab, which we think is exclusive to our community, can actually lead on to larger discussions about women's dress codes in this country, about the policing of women's dress codes in this country. I mean, we know people who've worked, for instance, in medicine, who've worked as lawyers. We know that Sri Lanka has very traditional rules with regard to what you can wear in certain professions. And I feel personally that if we're going to talk about niqab, if we're going to talk about banning or allowing certain modes of dress, we need to talk about all of them, and we need to talk about how they all affect women. And ask again whether it's okay for, I mean, I may be wrong, but you know, for men or for institutions to have opinions on what women can and cannot wear.
So with that, it gives us time to end this fruitful discussion. So this is the first of many discussions that we are proposing to have about the Muslim community, inshallah. Even though Muslims are clustered as one in Sri Lanka, we have so many schools of thoughts, we have so much of diversity, ranging from geographical location to the languages they speak to the attires they wear. Most of the things that hitherto discussed closed doors, we plan to bring before you and discuss with some youth and experts in those avenues. So until next time, thank you very much for joining, and Assalamu Alaikum.
There is great harm when you introduce laws like this, because you create suspicion, you fuel suspicions that have been initiated within the society. And these kinds of laws give that suspicion long-lasting effect. So I would say that it is fairly harmful to enact a law that forces someone into a situation where they believe in something, they are unable to practice it. And the way the constitutional right is worded, it is to secure your right to believe in something and practice, whether it be wearing the niqab or not. If it is your belief that the religion does say that you're obligated to do so, then you will feel a strong connection too. But if it is your belief that the religion says it is recommended, or the religion does say that you may choose not to do it if you want to, and you choose to live your life without wearing the niqab, then that choice too is protected in this constitution. And that is the beauty of it, the plurality of identities within Sri Lanka amongst religious communities, and the plurality of identities intra-community is respected by the provisions of this constitution.